Welcome to another edition of the Official Jets Podcast. Ethan Greenberg, Eric Allen, here in the BetMGM studio. We have a special guest on, Dennis Waszak, AP New York Jets beat writer. Waz, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
So, training camp underway. We're recording this after the first day of full pads. But Waz, let's start you off with a layup here. What have been your initial impressions of Jets camp, and what are a couple things that stand out to you, whether that be player or position?
If you want to go player first, I mean, Elijah Moore has really been impressive. And I think that it's hard to not single him out as a guy who has stood out on the field, and just he seems to be open all the time. He makes plays all over the place every day, every single day at every practice. And so that's been really promising to see from the rookie wide receiver. And then the other guy who's really stood out is Carl Lawson, and he seems to be in the backfield almost every play, and that is a nice thing to see. I mean, the battle between Lawson and Becton is really something to watch, and now that pads are on, you could kind of dig into that a little more and see how they play off each other and that sort of thing. So that's been really cool. But the other thing in a big picture way is the vibe. I think we've talked about it, and several of the other beat writers, just kind of the vibe around the Jets right now. There's a lot of, good vibes. There's a lot of optimism, new coach, the rookie quarterback. There's, trying to put the losing in the past, and you could feel it. There's something different right now, and it's a good thing for the franchise right now. And now you're getting into the meat of training camp now that the pads are on, and the real work is really starting up. So, and then once the preseason games start, but that's kind of the overall feel that I've gotten, for being here through the first 6 practices and that sort of stuff.
That's a great summation. I can't believe that the Jets reported actually 1 week ago today. They've already been in camp for a week. Before you know it, we're going to be here in early September and talking about the Jets' preparations for the Carolina Panthers. I'd agree with you, Waz. If you were to pick one player on each side of the ball who has stood out, you nailed it. Carl Lawson looks like something the Jets haven't had in a long time. I know he hasn't taken a snap for the green and white just yet. And Elijah Moore, Robert Saleh said he's an old soul, and he meant that in very complimentary terms, that this guy can't get enough. He absorbs a lot. He's a versatile performer, and he just makes plays on the football field every time we're out there, guys. We're going to get to the culture bit in a couple moments as well, but I wanted to ask you your description of what was happening out there on the practice field just hours ago, as we were just watching a typical training camp practice, the first padded practice of the 2021 training camp. And we looked up, and there was an offensive lineman, Cam Clark, down there on the field. I'd never experienced anything like that covering the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been covering camp, I think, since 2005. And yeah, it's always a scary thing when a guy goes down, but when you see a player not moving, and that was what the situation was here. We were up high, up on the patio, looking down and across the field. So at first, when it happened, you didn't even know, like none of us up there really knew what happened. And then as the players kind of separated, you saw that there was a guy on the field, and you couldn't tell who it was because he was kind of face down. And so his legs were kind of facing us, and they didn't move. And that's always a scary thing. And we've seen injuries in camp before, guys with knees and ankles and things like that. But, they're writhing in pain, and you could tell, like, oh man, this is something serious. They're hurt, but it didn't look like he was moving. And that was the scary thing. And then once you see the board come out and just the cart and bringing him over to the ambulance, it just, just from us looking at it, it's scary. You can imagine how the coaches and players feel too, just seeing one of their guys in that position. And, and it doesn't matter, young, old, whatever, but here's a young guy who's really trying to make his mark and kind of, find a role on this team. And it just shows you that, man, it just any second. I mean, this game is dangerous. We all know that, but man, it didn't look like it was anything out of the ordinary either. It just kind of, it was, I think Robert Saleh was saying he kind of rolled out for pass protection, and then that was it. He went down, and we'll see what happens, but hopefully he's okay. But yeah, man, just a scary thing to see. It doesn't matter how long you cover this sport and whether you're covering practices, games, the injuries can happen at any point. And it's a good example of that, just how that is.
Yeah, we're hoping by the time people are listening to this, we have some positive news on the Cam Clark front. But the reason why I bring that up is it was just a typical padded practice, and the Jets were towards the end of it, and Clark goes down, and Robert Saleh didn't wait too long, Waz and Ethan. He said, "That's it, fellas. We're not doing that last team period." And then for 10 minutes, we all sat there as people covered the team, and there were still guys on the field, but the medical personnel were attending to Cam Clark. But it was so eerie because you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah, it was weird. And, we couldn't tell who it was at first, all of us on the balcony just looking, knowing that there was somebody down. Then you kind of go by like process of elimination. We're like, okay, well, I see this guy, this guy, this guy. And then we heard the news that it was, in fact, Cam Clark. But changing topics here but keeping on the offensive line. The pads come on, offensive linemen obviously can get a little more physical in the trenches with the defensive linemen. And particularly on the interior, I'm sure that you've been impressed by the outside matchup, Mekhi Becton, Carl Lawson, and Elijah Vera Tucker, highly touted rookie. But I'm curious from your standpoint, Waz, as someone who focuses a lot on the O-line, at least in the time that I've been here, what do you make of this newfound depth across the front five for the Jets on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty good right now. And I like that, even Van Roten has looked pretty good, as one of the starting five at this point. When you have that mix where you can kind of move guys around and rotate and have competitions, that's what I'm trying to say. When you can have competitions where there are definitely guys who can come in and win jobs. You have, I mean, look at the right tackle spot. You bring in Morgan Moses, and you assume that George Fant will kind of be a swing guy, but man, that guy's, he's started and he has a lot of experience. So now if he doesn't start and Morgan does, which, we all assume, that's a nice depth piece right there. And then Alex Lewis also. So he moves from, left guard, and then all of a sudden you have a guy with a ton of experience who could play at that position. Maybe he wins the right guard spot. Who knows? But I think Joe Douglas made a conscious effort to overhaul the offensive line and solidify it. We've seen what all of the mix and matching and injuries also playing a part in that, what that can do to the offense and to the quarterback and just how things run. And I think by having Becton, by having Elijah Vera Tucker on that left side, you have two guys for the next, hopefully, several years. They're the foundation. Connor McDermott, is a guy who can come in and help in different spots. Also, he's a guy in a competition. Connor McGovern at center. You have a guy who's a veteran. I like what they're doing. I think this is the most depth I've seen on the O-line at this point in camp in a long time, where that, okay, here's the five, but if a guy gets hurt, they might be in trouble.
I love what I'm seeing after practice, Waz, too. And not just the team drills that we're charting and taking notes on and writing about. John Franklin Myers the other day, he was with the aforementioned Cam Clark for 20 minutes after practice. Today, it was Alex Lewis and Nathan Shepard, two younger veterans, I guess you would say, in the New York Jets. They were giving themselves help. And then Morgan Moses has not been here for a long time, but you continually see him in the ears of everybody. Talk about a professional attitude, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think a few of those guys that we've spoken to, Mackay, Morgan, John Franklin Myers, different guys on both sides. The interesting thing that I thought when talking to some of those guys over the past few days is that, and I think it was Mackay who said he and Carl Lawson don't trash talk. And you would think during camp, and maybe that changes as we get deeper into camp when you just want to like really like take out your aggression, but right now they're kind of just bouncing ideas off of each other's suggestions how to get better, and that's really cool because I think for the young guys to hear like, hey, you're doing this, and I need you to do something else because I need to get better. So if you're getting better, I'm getting better, and then we're getting better together. I mean, like that whole message, that's a really cool thing. And I don't know that I've really heard that from other offensive and defensive linemen over the years.
Yeah, there's somebody pissed off Jared Davis today, fellas. I don't know what happened, but after one of those team reps, his helmet's off and he's kicking it to the sideline.
Yeah, he was not a happy camper, no pun intended. But he wasn't hurt. He did come back and finish practice. So, but he definitely was not very happy after that play. Give us a couple guys that you have your eyes on to see maybe what they can do in training camp, whether that's someone fighting for a spot, a starting spot, a depth spot. Maybe it's a second-year guy. Doesn't matter who it is, just a couple players that you're like, what, I'm kind of curious to see how this player practices with pads on and then plays in the preseason.
Yeah, that's a good question because I think there are a lot of different guys that you can throw into that mix. I'll tell you one guy who's kind of stood out over the last few practices is wide receiver DJ Montgomery. We've seen him make some plays over the last few days, and he's one of those guys under the radar because everybody's talking about, Elijah Moore and Crowder and Corey Davis, and you wonder how many spots there are. But some of these guys, they're trying to make a spot for themselves, and I think he's one of those guys that's done that. Bryce Huff today had a sack I could put in quotes, and he's a guy you kind of forget about as a guy who might be able to mix in and help with the pass rush. I think there's another guy, Javelin Guidry, has made some plays throughout this camp and so far, and he's another guy who you might think, okay, well, they don't have Brian Poole anymore, but maybe Javelin Guidry is a guy who could be a nickel guy, and fill in. And I've liked what I've seen from him. So those are a few of the guys. And I'll tell you what, that running back competition and the rotation is really intriguing to me because they have so many guys who can do so many different things between, Coleman and Ty Johnson and Michael Carter, just guys that they could use and do different things with, and Pirine and that's what I'm really intrigued about, seeing how they'll all kind of mix in, because it's hard to imagine that they'll all make the roster, but I think they all have different skill sets that could help an offense, especially a young quarterback.
What do you think about the adversity this team has faced here early in training camp? You get the news of Greg Knapp's tragic passing, and he was so beloved here, not only at One Jets Drive, but throughout the National Football League. And that so well, Waz. Then Zach Wilson has a little holdout. It's a couple days, but then he's on the field. And then, your first padded practice, you have to end it early because an offensive lineman is hurt, and hopefully he's okay. The Jets have had to face a lot of adversity here early this summer, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, and we're only, a week in, it feels like more because of the way the days go and everything. But yeah, I mean, and those are the major things. And like we said earlier, hopefully, we know a little more and it's positive on Cam Clark. But yeah, I think like the loss of Greg Knapp, I mean, it's just obviously a tragedy. When you look at it from a football standpoint, it's tough because he was going to be such a vital part of Zach Wilson's development, especially in this first season, and how, what he could do to help Zach Wilson and the rest of the quarterbacks as well as the offense. He was a veteran presence who's been around. I mean, he's got he had so much experience and been so many places and had success, and I think that's Man, that's just tough from a football standpoint. And, personally, I mean, like these guys, I mean, I don't know that they've had a lot of chance to mourn either. Once we found out the news, just a few days later, training camp was starting. So I like the fact that the team has the decals on the helmet, the GK, and I think they'll be thinking of him all throughout the season. But yeah, I mean, there are certain things, and that's why having a coach who's got the calm demeanor and just like the command, he just commands, that demands respect, just the way he comes in, and I think that is important also. And I think all of these guys are buying in to what Robert Saleh is kind of, just his presence and the message that he's sending right now. So I think that's important to have to keep the team together during these, rough patches that have, cropped up early on here.
Waz, what have you made of Zach Wilson in his first 4 practices so far?
I think I think we can't get crazy about any of it. He was
Come on, Waz, get crazy.
He was right. He was rusty in that first practice. He was really good in the second, and he was up and down in the last 2. And I think that's to be expected, right? I mean, just a rookie trying to feel his way through his first several practices, and I think to expect anything more is unrealistic. And I like some of the things that he's done. He's made some plays that we've seen, and that we are expecting to see him rolling out to the right on the move, throwing long, deep, and connecting. And, and then other things where, he had Vincent Smith open down the field and he kind of underthrew a pass. And I think he's still getting the feel for the receivers and the timing and all that. And that's why we're here now, to see all that as the Jets to kind of come together and figure out what's going on. So it's hard to judge all of these things because it's not a game at this point. It's practice and they're trying out different things. But so yeah, I mean, Twitter can get crazy because they want to know, is this kid going to be a bust after 4 practices or whatever? But, I think he's at where you would expect him to be, like a really good day, a not so good day, and up and down day. So, but there's a ton of promise with this kid. You see it. You understand why they took him with the number 2 pick. There's flashes, and I'm sure we'll start seeing even more and consistently as we go on here through the summer.
Well, how about that? A reasoned take on the young quarterback. The bottom line is, isn't it that, listen, he's going to have some great moments. You could see the talent, and you can also see the insatiable hunger he has for football. He just can't get enough of it. But with that being said, there's going to be bumps along the way. There's going to be interceptions. There's going to be sacks taken. There's going to be losses. And Robert Saleh is prepared for that. They know that not only Wilson, guys, this is a young roster. So, Dennis, can you speak to the youth of this roster? You can start with Wilson, but, Saleh is not afraid to rock and roll with this group. I believe we've been talking about it here for a couple of weeks now. This is the youngest the Jets have been at this point in the summer in 2 decades.
Yeah, and I think that is something that everybody's going to have to keep in mind as we go along here. And I think Robert Saleh has even said it. There are going to be times where this team looks like it could go to the Super Bowl, and other times when it'll look like it hasn't been coached, and he said that. So I think he's trying to temper that, because I think coming in, right, like the optimism has been at a high, and at a point that we haven't seen in a long time around here. And, for good reason. There hasn't been a lot of winning. And I think now fans want something to cheer for. And I think they deserve that, obviously. But I think to rush or to think that it's going to happen right away, you have a lot of pieces here that can come together and be good, but there are going to be hiccups. Like we see it in the league, and just as Robert Saleh warned, it's just made so it's such a young roster. You have, and you think of the pieces that they have that could be potentially long-term key contributors, from Zach Wilson and Becton, Elijah Vera Tucker, Michael Carter, Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims. And then you go on the defense and you have, the young guys up front. I mean, at least the defensive line, you have experience there and you have a lot. But other than that, like, there are a lot of young guys. Look at the cornerbacks between, even Bless Austin and, Bryce Hall. There's a lot of youth there. And, I think fans are going to have to be patient. I think the Jets will be patient. They just want to see some progress. And I think that's the realistic view that you have to take with this team in year one under Robert Saleh.
This is maybe putting you on the spot a little bit. I'm not quite sure yet, but
come on, man.
But I guess I am going to put you on the spot.
Okay, well, I think one guy who does is CJ Mosley, and I think he will. I think there's just a lot to prove that he can come back and be that type of player, that CJ Mosley type of player. I think that'll be key. I like that he kind of changed his look, right? He talked to us recently, and he looked like a different guy. He dropped a lot of pounds. He wants to be faster, and I like that. I think Jared Davis is another one. We mentioned him getting all fired up and like kicking his helmet across the field. I think he's got something to prove because he's a guy who kind of got phased out in Detroit. And think about that. The Jets could have two candidates for comeback player of the year, really, in that middle linebacker area, and so those are two guys. I think Denzel Mims is a guy who will need to prove that he can be a contributor at this level, if not more. And you saw flashes last year. Right now, he's kind of running behind some of the other guys in training camp in terms of like wear on the teams, but it's hard to gauge that at this point right now. So I think those are three guys right off the top of my head that I could think. I think also those guys, like I mentioned, the cornerbacks, Bryce Hall and Bless Austin, those are guys who might not have been the most heralded coming out of the draft. They have opportunities here to really grab hold of starting jobs because it's so wide open back there. And they have starting experience. And I think those are two guys that really, and one other one that just Chris Herndon. I mean, we've been talking about him for the last few years, kind of being a key to the offense. And really, if he can come on, and he's had a couple of good practices here. I know like fans are like, but no, he has had some good practices. He's made some catches. And I think, man, if they can get him to become a consistent outlet for Zach Wilson, that just adds something to that offense. So I think those guys are guys that really kind of need to come through this training camp with a positive on their, next to their name, because they would be very important to the success this year.
So am I seeing things through a green and white lenses? This is my glasses right here, because I look at that defensive line and it doesn't have Quinnen Williams out there just yet. Can the Jets defensive line be one of the better units in football? Because listen, Lawson has been one of the stars at camp. I know we haven't played any games yet, but now you're pairing him up with potentially a dominant middle. Quinnen Williams, an emerging star. Sheldon Rankins is here. Full Lorenzo Fatukasi probably doesn't get the run he deserves. He played really well last season. He's in the middle. We can continue to go down the line. Albrecht said it. Jeff Albrecht said it in the spring, where a quarterback's going to step up in the middle. Maybe in the past in Carl Lawson's career, they could step up. And another guy that Ethan and I continue to talk about, John Franklin Myers is quietly having a really strong camp.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's key. You referred to with Jeff Ulbrich. If quarterbacks can't step up, I mean, that helps if the Jets have a weakness, I'll put in quotes, in the back end. That will help them, because if they are constantly putting pressure on the quarterbacks, well, the quarterback's not going to be able to just tee off and just throw it downfield and then rely on one-on-one matchups and that kind of thing downfield. I think, man, it's you mentioned all the guys and John Franklin Myers, Sheldon Rankins, even Vinny Curry. He hasn't practiced yet, but he's a guy who's got a ton of experience. And you mix all those guys, like, yeah, man, it's the totally a strength of this team, but they could be one of the best defensive lines in this league just because also a lot of those guys do different things. You know, you look at Lawson, he's not your traditional pass rusher. You have Quinnen Williams in the middle. Foley is just a big dude who's athletic, you know, and Sheldon Rankins is a veteran who's done a lot. And I think he's another guy who has something to prove too. You know, he is coming into this situation where, you know, he's dealt with some injuries the past few years, but when healthy, he's a force too. So, man, if you look at it from that perspective, yeah, I don't think you're looking through the green and white colored glasses at all. I think those guys could really be a force and really they could probably help this team win a few games just playing the way we expect them to.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys thought. Salah's not a cocky guy. He just projects a lot of confidence. But when he was talking about the defensive line the other day, he said, well, yeah, they're doing pretty good, but then we're going to get Quinnen Williams back, and then we're going to get Vinny Curry back and Phillips as well. I mean, like, I think he really senses he's got something very strong here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And to bring this back to your question that was answered, I don't think you're looking at the Jets defensive line just through green and white colored lenses. Waz, I just want to wrap up with this. You know, we've asked players in the past, training camp, like, what's your recipe for success? They're like, you know what? We hydrate, we sleep, we foam roll, we study. What is the media key to success through your eyes to get through a training camp? And what training camp year is this for you? You've been here since what, 06?
Yeah, I took over the beat in 06. The interesting thing was in 05, I covered training camp as a backup. And in 06, I was still a backup, didn't do training camp, but took over the beat right after training camp began. So whatever that makes it, 15, 16.
It counts.
I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, like trying to survive.
You're a young dude.
Man, you know what happened today? So, you know, it was overcast out. Who didn't put any sunscreen on his face? And then I realized
me and you.
Man, you're kidding me. What are you doing? You know, like you gotta put sunscreen on. And so those kind of things. Yeah, it's you know, it's such a balance of time, you know, managing your time. You guys know, I mean, you guys are busy also, and it's just like, okay, you know, you show up to practice, you're trying to figure out what's going on through practice, and then you got to write, and you just try to come up with story ideas and stuff like that. You have to pace yourself, I think, at this point, you know, and know, like, okay, like I don't need to tell all the stories right now. We have a few weeks, you know, and that's the thing. Don't count. Like, try not to count, you know, like, okay, you know, another practice, because all of a sudden it'll be week 1. And that's how it happens. And then the season rolls, right? I mean, all of a sudden we're like, hey, it's Thanksgiving, and now all the holiday stuff is coming out. It's like, it's crazy. So yeah, I'm still working on mastering the whole thing.
Hey, it's going to break it up nice this year with the joint practices, don't you think so? And
yeah,
hey, I thought it was very interesting when Salah said the other day that we'd love to practice with the Giants in the future. Well, not the way the Giants practice today, apparently. An all-out brawl.
Yeah, Waz, what do you make about that? A little Jets Giants all-out brawl next year?
I was thinking that, like, once I saw the news while we were standing there, it's like, well, maybe you might not want to have to brawl, because the Jets and Giants have a history of some of that. That's why they stopped doing those joint practices, because, you know, Jeremy Shockey, I think, was involved like way back. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you got the Packers and the Eagles. See how that goes. You got those two teams, and then see, because it could, you know, these guys by that time, they just want to start hitting people, you know. So we'll see. I think Jets Giants would be pretty fired up, though.
And then you got the Wilson Aaron Rodgers dynamic. That's the guy you looked up to growing up. He turned 22 today, and everybody's asking him about Brady, but he said he was drawn more to Rodgers the flashier of the two.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he did call Tom Brady the GOAT. And,
Right.
you know.
But I think it makes sense, Waz, because when Zach Wilson was coming out of the draft and in that process, a lot of people compared Zach Wilson's style of play and the motion to somebody like Aaron Rodgers. Don't you think that was the book on him coming out of school a little bit?
Well, yeah.
More than Brady, at least.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean that was, you look at him and you think Wilson's kind of a mix of Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, like some of the traits that those guys have. Whenever a guy is good at those off balance throws and just making things out of nothing, seemingly, that's what you see, and so it makes sense that he would be more of an Aaron Rodgers guy because that's the type of player he is than more than a Brady. But yeah, I like the line. It was like, yeah, so 22, and I think I was 1 when he came into the league. It's like, man, it makes us all feel old, like it's like, wow, that guy could be our son. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Hey, let me tell you something here. A little history lesson for you, Waz, from our own Randy Lang. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have never won at the Jets, ever. That's the only team who have never beaten the Jets, I believe, here at home. And Tom Brady is going to see the aforementioned Zach Wilson and company late in the year.
It's August, all right? It's August 3rd. Let's get there when we get there, and that will come before the Jets and Giants joint practices, maybe in 2022. That's all we have for this episode of the Official Jets Podcast. Waz, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. It was fun.
And we'll see you next episode on the Official Jets Podcast.